Hi, I'm Councilmember Matt Orlando. This is the latest edition of Chandler In Focus. Today we'll be talking about an exciting subject, budgets. This is my 23rd budget as a council member, and they get more and more exciting every year, and more new things are happening for our city of Chandler. Thank you very much, first of all, because of your support in 2021 bond election. A lot of the blockage of the streets you see today, the new public infrastructure, that's all happening because you said yes and authorized us to start doing those major infrastructure improvements to our city. We're going to talk a little bit about sustainability. We'll talk a little bit about some of the projects were there. This is a $1.6 billion budget. So today I have two of the finest people I've met for as far as budget goes, and as well as in good people in general. Dawn Lang, the Deputy City Manager and our Chief Financial Officer, and Matt Dunbar. He's our Budget and Policy Director. Welcome, Matt. Welcome, Dawn.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to get into budgets.
All right. Okay.
We just completed a budget in June of 2023. All right, we approved it for 1 July. And we move forward. And then what, immediately after, the budget starts over again, right?
It does. It is a process that feels like a year-round process anymore. And the year starts July 1st, goes to June 30th, and 1 year flies pretty quickly. So oftentimes staff are not only finishing up a year, they're starting a new budget year, and they're already starting to plan for the new year, the upcoming year. So this year was no different. So far, the process itself, as it moves forward, really the key date is when we kick off the new year in October with our mayor and council, and we start having conversations about the strategic goals that are set by mayor and council, and if there's any new updates to those, any direction you'd like to provide prior to us moving forward. So that's really an important meeting for staff as they start preparing for the new year to know if there are changes. And then after that, we put out the resident budget survey, which is a really important tool for us to get feedback from our residents. During that time, we're already starting to work on the forecast and update our revenue projections. In January, we go into conversations with departments about what needs they have to maintain or enhance service levels.
And let me stop you. We're already halfway into the first budget, not even halfway into the first budget, and we're
That's
already
correct.
this far down the road.
Yes, we are, and it's happening in tandem. While we're providing services to residents, we're looking back at the past year to see what has changed and has inflation impacted the budget lines. And so departments are already looking to see what we need for the upcoming year. And so through all that process, really it comes forward again back to mayor and council for 3 budget work sessions. Usually it's 2, but this year we actually held 3 sessions, as you know. A lot of interesting conversation and policy decisions that council has to make throughout that time in order to really formulate the proposed budget. So by then, the process takes us into then the all-day budget briefing at the end of April. And that's where all the departments stand up and they talk about all the great initiatives, services, capital projects for mayor and council and for our residents. But that's really the open discussion on all of that throughout that day. And then we get into all the final actions and open public meetings with our residents and on council agendas to finally adopt the budget and start another new year. So on July 1st.
It's an exhausting process, I know, but
It is.
And we see a lot of stuff happens in the background we just don't see. Yeah. So, one of the things I think you added to that was the citizen survey. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, but I remember that's really helpful because I know as I go out to the community, of course, you living in the community as well, or being around the community, you hear certain things about what's going on with this, what's going on with that. And I always say, hey, fill the budget sheet out so we know what your priorities are. So appreciate that.
Extremely important.
You bet. So Matt, tell me a little bit about how many departments you collaborate with and how do you get their information from them? It seems like...
Councilmember, we collaborate with all of the departments. We have 22 departments and major divisions throughout the city that we do a collaboration process with throughout the year to gather information, to refine that information. There's a lot of back and forth that goes with our department. So we truly appreciate all the support that they give a centralized budget office, because it's not just us doing all the work, it's the budget liaisons and the directors and individuals gathering data for us throughout the year. So there's a lot of effort with all of those, the variety of departments. And that's one of the things about being in the budget area that is really appreciated by me, is just the variety that we get to see. We're dealing with individuals from fire and police to everything from law and communications and infrastructure from IT perspective. So we get to see a variety of things throughout the city, how it impacts our residents.
So do you, once you get their input, because I know there's competing interests, obviously, and there's only so much resources, do you sit down there and just kind of just go through it and say, gee, this is more important than this at this time, based upon council, city, and the residents?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there's always competing packages for the amount of dollars that are available. So it initially starts at the department level. Each department will prioritize the requests that they have and say, these are my top priorities, and kind of work their way down as to those that are important but maybe not as important as their top priorities. From that list, those all are then gathered together and brought to the city manager's office, where we have additional feedback and discussions. We do a question and answer sessions with each department to really get a sense of all of those priorities that they have. And then there's a prioritization process at that level of all of those top priorities that have been brought together from the department. So it's really kind of a joint effort in making sure that the most important priorities that we've found throughout the year are incorporated into the budget, as many of those as we can. And then part of the budget process that we do is we ensure that each of those requests has been identified as to how it meets the strategic focus areas that Mayor and Council have set for the budget process. We want to ensure that anything that we incorporate into the budget actually takes into account those focus areas that are most important to our residents that have been shared with Mayor and Council.
Yeah, it's sort of like preparing your home budget. I mean, you have so much revenue, income, you have housing and food and shelter, and then those are the we have to do those things, right? And then you have the gee, what if, or the wants and the desires. So what are some of our, I'll ask you, Dawn, what are some of our financial obligations that we have to, once we get that revenue stream, now what do we have to? We have to start clicking off certain things, and then whatever remaining is obviously what we could use for new programs or existing programs.
As we formulate the forecast, we really kind of dissect the revenue into ongoing revenue that we believe will be there year over year, and
That's
one-time
like sales
revenue.
tax, stuff like that?
Yep,
or-
sales, the large portion of sales tax, property tax, things that come in year over year. But there are some revenues that ebb and flow with the economy. So we don't want to, for instance, hire a park maintenance worker and depend on that one-time revenue to support that person. So it's a a process we go through with our forecasting, and then when we finally get to what those numbers are, the one thing that I think might not be totally obvious to folks in our community, but our city government provides so many essential services, but almost 75% of those services are the people that provide those services. So it's the wages of those fine folks that take care of our community. And whether it's police officer, a firefighter, to someone in neighborhood resources that helps the most vulnerable people in our community, to people in IT that manage our technology. All of that, really, those are the ones that we need ongoing revenue to support those service providers. So that's really kind of the top part that we look at first, making sure that we can support our existing service levels. And then, like you mentioned, there might be other revenues that come in, even in your own personal budget, that are needed to do the wants. So it could be things that don't come up every year. It could be a study that we need to do to look closer, like a solar study. It could be something like that. Once it's done, we don't have to do it again. We've got the information we need, and we can make some decisions. So it's a little bit of that as we're looking through the costs that are brought forward by the departments.
And then, of course, there's always the bonds that we float. I talked about earlier. We floated those bonds, and now we have to pay back the interest on those bonds. So that's obviously has to come off as well before we start looking down. So it's just like any other budget.
Yeah.
What are some of the operating budget highlights, and what do they mean for the city and residents? And I'll pick on you, Matt.
Yeah, so I think in any given year, there are obviously always highlights, and there are definitely some that as we look forward to fiscal year 24-25 as well. Some of those highlights that I would want the residents to know about include things like improvements to their public safety services. We've got additional police officers and firefighters that are now going to be funded on an ongoing basis that will continue to make this community one of the safest in Arizona and in the nation. So, that is great news for our residents. We've got improvements to their parks and facilities. One of the focuses of mayor and council that they've given us the last many years is, we want to see some kind of improvements at some of those parks that are starting to age and show their age a little bit. So we've done some nips and some tucks at some of those parks and made improvements that have really helped kind of spruce those up. And I think we have 4 or 5 additional parks in this next year that are going to see some of those improvements that I think residents will truly appreciate. We also last year made a concerted effort, or over the last few years have made a concerted effort to pay down an unfunded liability for our public safety pension. And through that process, we've been able to free up some ongoing dollars by using some one-time dollars to pay that down. And again, Mayor and Council have committed to an additional payment this year to ensure that that payoff status remains in a paid-off status. So we're truly showing that support for our public safety officers and firefighters that are reliant on that pension for their futures.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I know the parks is big and the streets, obviously. I know we made it as a council decision to upgrade our quality of street QoS.
PQI?
PQI, there you go. The quality assurance, raise that level from a 60%, which means I have to go back over year to repair to a better grade of about 70%, which hopefully could stretch out the use of that street before we have to go back to some major repairs. So again, that's the type of stuff we look at when we do have the additional funding to do to raise that. And then obviously at the parks, police and fire. Let's not forget our pickleball courts. All right, they're coming online sometime this year.
They are.
And then for those of you that play cricket, we are working on those cricket fields for you. Trust us, we're going to get there eventually with those cricket fields. And I think we have a study right now looking at some reimagining our parks and get those cricket fields in, folks. So we do pay attention. So tell me, what are some of the key projects this year that we probably want to share with our residents and what we're doing?
Matt mentioned a few, but and he'll probably add more to this, but you mentioned streets. Streets are constantly a focus for us because that is infrastructure that everybody uses in our city, and we want to make sure that they are quality, and as they age, that we're maintaining those streets. So the cost of maintaining the streets has gone up, and so additional one-time funds like you mentioned, have been put into that. We also have some intersection widening projects. We have enhancements to our parks, including our regional park, Tumbleweed, that is, we're adding on to it the multi-gen facility, which is going to be a wonderful addition to that will allow for more programming for all ages in the city. We'll have more softball fields that are opening up this year.
Yep, this year.
Yep. I'm really excited for that one because that's been needed for a long time, and council heard the voices of our residents. We also have at Tumbleweed, I know I'm missing a couple there.
We've got the pickleball courts that's going
pickleball.
in.
Of course, 18 pickleball courts being added at Tumbleweed. And also, at the same time, we're expanding a little bit of the tennis courts as well, and adding additional lighting there. So some really great enhancements. There's parks all over the city, too, that are in our community and neighborhood parks programs that are going to be getting new equipment and some additional work added to them as they age. I believe Matt mentioned that. We have projects in other areas, and I'll have Matt go from there.
Yeah, so, Don picked all the fun ones that we get to talk
You
about.
you can talk about IT.
That's right, but
wastewater.
Exactly.
IT.
So from an IT perspective, we do have some major projects in that realm. And I think a lot of it stems to the security that we have. The city of Chandler has a lot of data on businesses and residential homes, and our utilities, invoices, people that we pay through that process, So there's a lot of information. We want to make sure that that information is secure and that we don't have data breaches. So we've have had a concerted effort to improve that security structure. We have a large project to undergo a complete software, kind of our underlying ERP software replacement that's going to take us a few years to get that done, but that will significantly enhance not only the work that goes in behind the scenes on some of the accounting and HR functions, but also from a security perspective. I think the other ones that you mentioned, like our utilities, water and wastewater, and solid waste, we've seen some significant projects added to our capital plan, and we'll see some of those start to be constructed in this next fiscal year, especially on our wastewater side. And then in the future years on the water sides, we've taken a hard look at some of the infrastructure that was put in 40 or 50 years ago and want to make some efforts, significant efforts to improve that infrastructure so that it is maintained in a manner to make sure that no one in the city of Chandler has major issues with their utilities. When they turn the water on, it's there for them, and when they flush, there's somewhere for it to go. So,
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about that because, you know, obviously the stuff that when I was on the council in the 90s we put together now, that's 30-something years old. And before that, you know, you're looking at 40 years old. So we have to take a, so it's a, you know, I just want to tell the residents out there, or the viewers, that it's an issue the council looks at every year. We're pretty we're very fiscally responsible. We have a AAA bond rating, which you compare to your FICO score. If your FICO score is real high, it costs you less to borrow money. Our AAA bond rating is high, it costs us less now to go out for bonds, and we get a higher rate on those returns. So there's a correlation there of why we want to keep that bond rating as high as possible.
Exactly.
And that's one of the very few cities in the nation that actually has AAA bonding and highest bond rating in all those communities, which helps us much better prepared when we do sell bonds or have to go out to the market.
Absolutely.
It's exciting stuff we're doing here. So one of the things dear to me, besides the ball fields, is the solar. We did a major project this year. I don't know who wants to answer that question. You want to tag team it, so it's okay. But we did a major study on that this year, and we're just getting ready to do the next phase of that. So,
Part of your strategic goals and focus areas is sustainability and technology. And one of the action items or goals that was set is to do a study on solar. That was completed this year, and we reviewed 25 different locations. 23 of them became viable locations to actually add solar. And why this project is probably different than what residents might be thinking of is the scale of the project. It's a lot of solar that would get installed that would actually generate what would be used in any given day. So we're not storing energy. It absolutely correlates to the use of that facility. So what it does is it allows the company who's helping us to guarantee ongoing utility savings every single year for 20 years. So it's a really great thing for the city of Chandler and for our residents. Anytime you can lower cost, because other costs are going up exponentially, we're trying to do our part to bring costs down as well, so we don't have to constantly depend on new revenue streams. So this is a really positive project for the city of Chandler.
yeah, I know. And, you know, we're also taking advantage of the government's ability to support those programs, and there's grants out there, obviously, for other projects. So we're taking a really big. Probably more so the last few years, we've looked at grants a lot more. I think we always had the attitude of, well, we're pretty well off city, you know, let somebody else. But I think we're realizing that we want to keep some of those grants as well. There's some things we just can't do with what we're trying to do with our revenue stream. So that's an enhancement to that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm excited about that solar project. I know we're going to put a major one at the airport. We're putting a major one at the wastewater treatment plant.
Yep.
So that'll help run those facilities. But the other thing we didn't touch on, again, going back to our innovation and thinking, is we've taken this one-time dollars you talked about, which we only get once a year, once every other year, and we put that into a project like LED lights.
Yes.
We did
that's
that. The council did that 3, 4, 5 years ago, and now that creates a revenue because now we're not paying SRP or APS. We're actually keeping that revenue. We're not paying as high, right?
We're not. Councilmember Orlando, that is correct. That LED project is one where we were able to apply one-time dollars including some federal funds that we received through the Recovery Act.
That's what it was,
that
yeah.
helped us speed up that project and be able to replace all the lights to LED in the city, street lights. So that has actually generated savings of over $650,000 in utility savings again, that will, again, instead of finding a new revenue source, it helps offset those increasing costs due to inflation.
And the
really
same with the solar now, that's going to have an ongoing revenue stream as well. And obviously solar, I don't foresee pricing of electricity going down or even staying straight. So it's even a better return once we get that in place too.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, we're doing some EV parking structures at our city, and we're looking at EV vehicles as well. The issue with that, residents, is they just can't manufacture them fast enough for us to procure them, but we'll get there eventually on that one. So sustainability issues. And then we just hired an arbiter, and the trees, right? We're planting we're doing an inventory of trees, I heard, right?
We are, yeah. So we have a new arborist that has been on board with the city now for a little over a year. I think he came last year, maybe. And he's been doing a great job. The first step was to get an inventory, which they just completed, of all the trees in the city. And so the next phase of that is to ensure the integrity of those trees and ensure that we're taking proper care of them. And there's going to be a focus on some of the irrigation needs that those trees have. Are we overwatering or underwatering them, and make sure that that's dialed in correctly. It's anticipated that we'll have some overwatering issues that we can correct, and that again will bring some of those cost savings that you're talking about. So anytime we can do any of those projects as your focus area, as mayor and council was directed, let's find some sustainability projects that will help save some money. That's a great example of another one that will be able to assist the city.
Yeah, I agree.
Not to mention great shade.
That's right.
Oh, shade, yeah.
Got to
that's
have shade in Arizona.
Yeah, and I think we're working with the school district as well as the Parks and Rec to replant some trees and repositioning them. And the other thing I know the city streets are working on as they're doing projects or replanting and making sure the trees that we took out are just as
Replaced.
And they're looking for ways of now letting trees grow, because obviously if you trim a tree, it's going to create more, or a bush or something, creates more water. A lot of good stuff happening. I just can't go on. We could probably spend 4 days on this program talking about all the great things we're doing.
That would be another great interview for you.
There we go.
There you go.
But we have a website you go to if you want it,
There you go.
chandleraz.gov, and there's a whole bunch of stuff we're doing in there. In fact, you could even look at all of the projects that we're working on online and get an updated version of that. I think our goals were like 84% of our goals, or 86% of our goals that we put a year and a half ago already been taken care of.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so what ways can our residents, we talked a little bit about the budget survey, what other ways can our residents contribute to our feedback of the budget?
So, there's a variety of ways. Obviously, we have a lot of public meetings that they're welcome to attend, and then they kind of have an opportunity at the end of those meetings to talk with mayor and council. And then we have our public meetings where they're asked to voice their opinions with mayor and council. So we have those remaining meetings coming up. In May, we have the tentative adoption of our budget. So that's a great opportunity for them to not only hear the presentation about the budget, but they can also put in a speaker card and speak to it. May
23rd.
May 23rd.
May 23rd.
Yeah. And then we have the final adoption of the budget in June, on June 13th. And we'll also have a presentation and talk about the tax levy at that point. That's our first time addressing the tax levy.
And that will include a public hearing.
Absolutely, a public hearing.
June 13th.
And that will also include an opportunity for them to hear about the direction mayor and council gave us to bring that property tax down lower on the primary property tax side. So again, our 9th consecutive year of reducing that property tax to offset some of the increases they've seen through the values of the properties increasing. And then the final adoption of that tax levy will be at the end of June, on the 27th, where they'll have another opportunity to voice their feelings about that tax levy. So there's those opportunities. They can also go to our website, which is chandleraz.gov//budget. And when they get there, there's a plethora of information about Everything we've talked with mayor and council with, the presentations are all there. There's a budget highlights. The actual proposed budget document is there. The capital plan is there so they can review all that. And then there's a button right at the top that says feedback, and they can provide any feedback or comments they want to get to us so that we can ensure that we're meeting the needs of our residents. So there's a variety of ways. And then, of course, the most important is each year when we kick off that budget survey that Don mentioned, that is a great opportunity for them in a variety of areas to share and voice their thoughts and feelings about how we're doing with their taxpayer dollars. And I think, from the past surveys we received, we're doing an excellent job, and we want to continue doing that. So their voice is definitely important for that process.
Wow. Anything else? Because we're running out of time here, but anything?
I would just make one last statement that people across all of our departments, they're out in the field, they're working, they're doing things, serving our residents, and they are always happy to engage with residents. And that feedback that they receive actually comes up through our budget process and helps us adjust services accordingly. So it's important, and we will always have a focus that in the end that this document, budget document, and the budget we put together financially actually reflects the needs of our residents and to make Chandler a great place to live, work, or play.
Yes. And one more thing. I think, how many budgets award you won now? What's your total?
It's a 39th.
39th year that we were
in
we were
this next budget
recognized
year.
by the National
Government
Gov-
Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Award.
Yep.
Mouthful.
Yeah, it is a really great budget. I've seen other cities' budgets. We really do a lot of detail, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, Dawn and Matt, thank you very much. We've run out of time today. Like I said, we could probably spend a long time. I know you
We can
two
talk
definitely.
forever.
I know. We love budgets, right?
Yeah.
And I think you did say earlier about the chandleraz.gov/budget for more information. And again, for other projects that are going on, go to the Chandler EZ website, and again, you'll find out a whole bunch of areas that we're working on, timelines, and I think we're implementing a new streets update just recently, right? Where you guys should go to a map or project development, go on a map, click on an area, and you can find out a little bit about that project, what's
Yeah.
going on, and the time frames. So more information to help us navigate our daily lives. Thank you for joining us today, and hope to see you soon on our next Chandler in Focus.